When going for your final render, you may be tempted to come into the options in PhotoView and just simply crank this to maximum, but maximum isn't always necessary for the best renderings. Typically, there's not much of a difference between best and maximum, and usually you'll want to select something between better and best. Good typically doesn't give you that great of a render, and I wouldn't suggest using it for anything that you want to actually look fairly attractive. But we're going to go ahead and look at a few image samples to see what they look like. Now you might be wondering why you wouldn't just turn this up to maximum and be done with it. Maximum from the renders that I've worked with typically takes double the time of best, or at least 50% more time. Best obviously takes more time than better, and better more than good. Good's usually a very quick render, better also typically fairly quick, especially if you're working just in a single part. If you're working in a larger assembly, any one of these renderings can take a very long time. If I want to render out a 1,000-part assembly, this maximum is going to take a very long time. Now it might be necessary to use it, but it will take a very long time. So if I quickly look into the help, I searched out PhotoView options so I could point out the section on render quality. And there's a few areas where render quality is going to be very important. In renderings where we need to have quite a few reflections off of each other, or quite a few refractions. So let's say several glasses of water or several pieces of glass lined up one after another. You can see in this case good can only do 1 reflection and 4 refractions, and then better does a few more reflections as well as refractions. And then at maximum we have the ability to do 10 refractions and 10 reflections. Now these are options that can be changed with a slight workaround, and I'll discuss that in the next video. But basically, if I have 5 pieces of glass lined up and I'm going from air to glass and back and forth, there'll be 2 refractions per piece of glass, and that'll get us to 10. So on that 6th piece of glass, which I'll show a picture of, we'll have 6 pieces of glass to go through, and so the rendering won't quite work. Anti-aliasing quality is also changed quite a bit through these renders, and the number of indirect rays that are considered increases substantially. The other reason I wanted to point out the PhotoView help, or the Solidworks help for the PhotoView options, is that in an indoor rendering where all of our lighting is coming from outside of a room, for example, good, better, and best don't work very well for this because we just don't get much light in here. On the flip side of this, if you do have lights within this room, then typically you don't have to go to maximum. But you can see the substantial difference between the rendering times. 29 seconds for good, 54 for better, so about double, a little bit less. And then we get significantly longer renderings for best and maximum. My typical rule of thumb is if it's something that's external, for example this set of longboard trucks, if it's simple enough, I'll go with best. And if it's a very large assembly, typically I use better unless best seems to be absolutely necessary. The first rendering I have here is good, and you can see a significant difference in the shading, most probably due to the number of indirect rays that are allowed. And one of the areas to look for is graininess. So the model will look a lot more grainy in the good quality than in subsequent qualities. So you see there's not a huge improvement between better and best. It's very slight. In this case, I consider better and best essentially interchangeable, and maximum you do see a little bit more of a difference in the shading, but once again very little difference in quality, so maximum here would probably not be that necessary. Once again, I have 4 more renderings from good to maximum. You can see this is very grainy in the good. Good is pretty much just a useful tool for seeing what your final render will look like in a general sense, and to make sure that the render is set up correctly. And then you see better get significantly smoother. And once again, based on how the grain changes between better and best, in this case I'd probably stick to best because it does look slightly better. Once you do push out to maximum, you see very little change in the model. So this is another case where maximum might not be entirely necessary. If you are working with a simple model like this, the rendering time takes a few minutes, maybe 4 or 5 minutes. So if you have the time to spare, sometimes maximum is just the most convenient because you know you'll get the best rendering quality. But once again, some of the maximum renderings will take very long times. So here we have 3 cylinders that are made from glass, and for each area of thickness we have 2 refractions. So I have light going from the air into the glass and back out in the air. So that's 2 refractions. Once it passes through another side, it's going to be 2 more refractions, and so forth. So on the outside here I have 2 refractions, no issues. 4 refractions, still okay with the good settings. And then I get in the areas with more than 4, and all of this just turns black. If you go to better and best, they have the same number of refractions possible. So once again we have 2, 4, here we would have 6, here we would have 8, and once we pass 8 we no longer get the transparency. Once again this turns black. And lastly is the maximum. Once again this was 8. This area has 1 more side to pass through, so it's 10, which is the limit for maximum. And here we have 12 refractions going through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 layers to produce those 12 separate refractions. So once again, this, when it hits its limit, is going to turn black. And as I stated before, there is a slight workaround for this, and I'll cover it in the next video. So once again, when choosing your render quality, keep those things in mind. Keep in mind how the grain in different materials changes, and whether you're going to have enough lighting or not to be able to use a lower setting. Once again, the benefit of the lower settings is saving quite a bit of time. And on the flip side, the higher quality settings give you better renderings in quite a few cases.